What is up everyone, Hero276 here, and welcome to today's video and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got an interesting team here for you today, featuring a double dark and normal core. Obstagoon and Alolan Raticate are two widely forgotten about Pokemon in today's Great League meta, as we see a lot of Noctowl, Lanturn, and Trevenant, but also a lot of Medicham. So you might be thinking what I've done in response to a Medicham or some other counter user. We put Charizard on the lead, specifically a Party Hat Charizard, just to kind of help deal with those counter users, potential fairy types, and bug types as well. This team has a 73% win rate so far, so I am seeing tremendous success with it, and I thought I'd showcase some of the battles that I have, including a 4-in-1 set and 3 bonus battles. Before I dive into today's video, I just want to give a special shout out to my Spotify page. If you enjoy the music used in this video and other videos, consider following me on my Spotify page where you can stay notified about all of my album releases. There you can also buy my albums for just $4.99 each. This month I am planning on releasing a new album to my Spotify account, so definitely be sure to check that out in the next month. Without further ado, let's jump right into the battles. And here we are starting off with the first battle leading into Umbreon. Charizard gets outbulked in this matchup, so we're going to switch into Alolan Raticate. I'm going to build up some energy, but my opponent decides to switch late into a Noctowl. At this point, we have an energy lead here, so we are able to flip switch in this matchup if we wanted to. Opponent is going to let the first Crunch go through, and likewise, I'm going to let the first Sky Attack go through. As you're going to see, this is not going to do a lot of damage. Alolan Raticate is very tanky. Going to go now for the return in case they decide to call a Crunch. Opponent shields it up, and now we're in a bit of a precarious situation. My opponent could just throw the Sky Attack to take me out, but I'm able to reach another Crunch. This Crunch gets the Noctowl very low. Opponent is going to throw their energy, and at this point, I'm going to shield up and try to take switch. The game is going to lag a little bit, but finally the Sky Attack does force my shield. Trying to farm down, but Noctowl has too much energy. Unfortunately, it looks like I'm not going to be able to take switch. I'm going to send in the Obstagoon and get ahead on energy for whatever is in the back. Opponent will send in a Lanturn, and honestly, I'm perfectly fine with this because Charizard certainly doesn't want to see a Lanturn. I'm going to go for the Obstruct. That raises my defense while simultaneously lowering theirs, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. Surf basically does nothing at this point, so now I'm going to go for a Night Slash on the CMP tie. This will do some solid chip damage to the Lanturn, getting them quite low. I'm going to let the Surf go through as well, and it should be able to reach another Night Slash on the CMP tie. Opponent sends back in the Umbreon, and I kind of have to stay in here. I want to do as much counter damage as possible. They go for the Foul Play. That doesn't KO. I'm not able to reach an Obstruct, and that's okay. Lanturn is in a position where a Blast Burn would KO, so now it's really all up to Charizard. Charizard is going to farm up a ton of energy. Unfortunately, Lanturn reaches a Foul Play, but I can't shield this as a Surf would do significantly more damage. Going to go now for another Overfarm, going for the Blast Burn now. This will do some solid damage to Umbreon, but they do shield it up, and at this point, shielding up any move from Umbreon is a must as it will KO from this health range. Opponent is going to farm up a little bit more. I anticipate that they bring back in the Lanturn. I overfarm on my energy just enough so they don't reach the Surf. Blast Burn will take them out. And we still have one more Wing Attack to get to the Blast Burn versus the Umbreon. This will take them out, and it will give us the win. Hopping into game number 2, picking up a lead up against Greedent. Now, this is another Pokemon that significantly outbulks Charizard, so in an effort to bait out their best counter to a Dark and Normal type, I switch into Alolan Raticate and they send in Azumarill. And even though Azumarill can hit my entire team for super effective damage, Alolan Raticate has play against it. As you can see, that return does a lot of damage, and Alolan Raticate is just so bulky that it can survive a play rough very comfortably. And they're not going to be able to farm us down before we reach multiple moves. So Alolan Raticate can honestly threaten switch here. Opponent shields up the Crunch. I'm able to make it to another Crunch on the CMP tie. And Azumarill can let this go. It will not KO. But I will be able to commit a shield here thanks to the defense drop. Quick Attack will farm them down first. And we just flipped a matchup against the Fairy type with even shields. That is unbelievable. They send back in the Greedent, and the threat of another move forces them to throw, but at this point, I could just send an Obstagoon. I have the alignment that I needed. Obstagoon comes in, These counters are doing a lot of damage. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. If there's any place to see a Charmer, it's on the lead up against my Charizard. Granbull does not have a great matchup here, so they're going to switch into Ninetales, and I'm going to send in a Alolan Raticate. Now, in this moment, I do reach the Crunch, and that's a good thing. Crunch is going to do some solid damage to my opponent. At this point, I'm going to let the move go through as well, but in this moment, I kind of forgot that Overheat was a thing, so as you're going to see, that does a tremendous amount of damage, and to add insult to injury, they outpace me to the Weather Ball, and I just kind of have to let this go through. There's no way I can flip switch at this point, so I want to send back in the Charizard after waiting my switch clock to get a farm down. Charizard can tank whatever moves that they throw. Even if it's a Weather Ball, they're not going to do a ton of damage, but they don't even make it. But they have a Lantern in the back, and my Obstagoon is going to get aligned onto their Charmer. So, effectively, this is game over. I try to play it out, go for the Obstruct. My opponent lets it go through. This is just super unfortunate here. We just get hard-walled from here on out. Night Slash is almost going to KO. Obstagoon putting in its best work. Charizard comes in, and we can't really shield up any of these moves because any of Lantern's moves would threaten to KO. After Charizard gets into Deep Red, I'm going to forfeit the match. Hopping into game number 4, picking up a very nice lead into Shadow Beedrill. These wing attacks are super effective, but these poison jabs are really adding up too. I build up to the Blast Burn and go for the Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw is going to force a shield for my opponent, and my opponent CMPs on the Drill Run. Even though this is resisted, it would still do a lot of damage. Shadow Beedrill hits very hard on the Glassy Charizard, and now I'm going to commit to the farm down, but they reach a move. At this point, I'm just going to let it go. It's a Fell Stinger, I survive, and I have leftover energy for whatever comes in. They bring in a Lantern. Blast Burn, though, will still chunk, doing a lot of resisted damage. And now I'm going to bring in a Alolan Raticate, basically as a damage sponge, since it is bulkier than Obstagoon, though both of these Pokemon actually have a surprising amount of bulk to them. Gonna go for the Crunch now. Crunch is gonna do some solid damage onto the Lantern if they decide to let it go through. Lantern lets the move go through. Lantern is gonna go for a move here. Whatever it is, I can tank it. It's just gonna be a Surf. Surf is not gonna do a lot of damage. Opponent is gonna throw the Surf straight away, allowing me to catch onto Obstagoon and bank all of the energy onto Alolan Raticate. In the back, they have Galarian Stunfisk, and this is perfect. Now I'm gonna go for the Obstruct. This is so that way their moves can do less damage, and their defense will be lowered so my counters will do more damage. Opponent will throw a move here. This is enough for the Earthquake, but I'm going to call the bait. It's just a Rock Slide. That's very nice. They're going for another Rock Slide, but this will not KO, and will also not put Obstagoon in a range where they can farm down. I'm going to throw the Night Slash at the last possible second. Night Slash here will KO if they decide to let it go through. Opponent shields it up, and I'm able to reach another Night Slash. This is the game-winning move. Opponent lets it go through, and it's just going to be the Lantern in the back, but it looks like my opponent force quit the app. So at this point, we're in a position where we can just counter down and take the win. Hopping into game number 5, picking up a terrible lead into Bastiodon. Gonna save switch immediately into the Alolan Raticate, but this isn't too great either because quick attacks are double resisted and Crunch doesn't do a lot of damage. My opponent could have just stayed in, but they end up switching into Shadow Victreebel, which does not like to take Crunch damage. So I'm gonna be able to make 2 Crunches, and this will either force switch or both of their shields, and I'm fine with either. Opponent gives up both shields. And even though they farm down, I still do have the Charizard to tank all of that energy. Opponent is going to go for the Acid Spray. That's not going to do a lot of damage, and I'll be able to wing attack all the way down. My switch clock is still not up yet, so to preserve the Charizard for later, I'm going to go for a Blast Burn, and after this lands, I'm going to immediately pivot into Obstagoon. In comes the Goon. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. And now claiming our set rewards for that set, but don't go anywhere because we have 3 bonus battles left. 4 and 1 set here to contribute to these battles. Very nice performance from this team. Hopping into the first bonus battle, picking up a neutral lead into Pidgeot. I'm going to immediately save switch into one of my Dark and Normal types to potentially bait out a counter. Opponent is going to stay in, allowing me to reach the Crunch first, and Crunch will do some solid damage onto the Pidgeot. Pidgeot shields it up, which leads me to believe that they're going to go for a Feather Dance, so I'm going to no shield. Unfortunately, they full send the Brave Bird. That does a ton of damage, and then they bring in Galarian Stunfisk. Galarian Stunfisk is not going to be able to farm down before I reach a couple of moves. I go for 1 Crunch. That's going to do some nice damage. Hopefully I can make another, but my opponent throws their energy first. This Rock Slide will take me out from this range, but I can bring in Obstagoon here, and I should be able to do some work with the counters. I'm going to wait out my switch clock, send in the Obstagoon. I'm doing as much damage as I can with the counters. They're out of move. It is enough for the Earthquake, so I will respect it with the shield. It is the Earthquake, and now I'm just going to try to counter down. I get the full farm down. My opponent is going to send back in the Pidgeot. I'm going to go for the Obstruct first, so that way I can raise my defense. Opponent lets the move go through, and now I'm going to go for a Night Slash. Obstagoon has a ton of energy here. Night Slash is going to land, and this is okay. At this point, I'm going to try to counter down, but I'm not able to do so. I catch the move on Charizard. It's a Feather Dance, a brilliant catch. They have Jellicent in the back, so Charizard doesn't really matter too much. They're running Bubble as well, so it's very likely that they're going to commit to a full farm down because these bubbles are really adding up. But if they do that, I should be able to reach 2 Blast Burns here. Blast Burn number 2 is going to get this Jellicent quite low in its health, bringing it into the red, and now I could just send in Obstagoon. I'm going to go for the Obstruct. Obstruct here is going to grab a shield from the Jellicent, and I get the defense raise, and their defense drops. At this point, Bubble Beam is not going to do a lot of damage, and because their defense is lowered, it's basically like bringing it back to null, but they're able to reach a second Bubble Beam. That's okay for me. They try to catch on Pidgeot, but to no avail. My opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. Hopping into game number 2, picking up a very good lead into Scrafty. Not only is this a positive matchup for the flying type Charizard, but our backline gets absolutely crushed by Scrafty. Scrafty makes our decision easy, going for the power-up punch. That's going to do some very little resisted damage. Charizard is now going for the Dragon Claw bait. Hopefully we can grab a shield. We do. And now we're going to build up to the Blast Burn and go for it as soon as we get there. Blast Burn will one-shot if it goes through, and it does. So now we have switch and shield advantage. Opponent is going to send in a Galarian Stunfisk, trying for the Blast Burn, but my opponent throws right away. Very smart play by them. I let the Charizard go down, and now I'm going to send in Obstagoon. Obstagoon's going to come in. Counters are doing super effective damage. They catch my Night Slash onto a Trevenant, possibly going for a resisted close combat catch, but I am running Night Slash and Obstruct. Now I'm going to catch their move onto my Alolan Raticate. This is just the Seed Bomb. It's not going to do a lot of damage. Alolan Raticate is going to quick attack down this Trevenant, but it appears that my opponent has force quit the app. And you know what that means, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like we got ourselves an old-fashioned Wild Western duel. Everyone's just standing around. No one knows what to do. This is awkward. Who's going to make the first move? It's going to be the Alolan Raticate going for the crunch, looking to break the silence. And if this lands, this will do a devastating blow as it does super effective damage to our Cowboy Tree, taking it down. And now that the tree is down, it's going to have to send in its Bear Trap, Bronco Bustin', Buckaroo Friend. The Galarian Stunfisk is coming back into the battlefield, but it is getting shredded by counter. Going to try and counter all the way down with the Obstagoon. What a devastating blow to that rage-quitting opponent, and that's a good game. Hopping into the final bonus battle, picking up a lead up against Sableye. What I'm going to look to do in this matchup is farm up to when they reach the Foul Play, which is after 6 Shadow Claws, and then catch onto Alolan Raticate. This Foul Play will be resisted. It does not do a ton of damage. Opponent is going to send it a Noctowl, and unfortunately, from that Foul Play chip damage, I won't be able to flip switch here, at least without investing a shield. So I'm going to go for the crunch. No defense drop, unfortunately, and it looks as though I'm not going to be able to flip it unless I get a defense drop. So I'm going to farm up to the crunch. This should be on a CMP tie, which Alolan Raticate should win, and if I get a defense drop, I will commit to the farm down. Crunch does get the defense drop, and at this point, I'm shielding. I'm going to try to quick attack down and leave with a move for the Sableye. Alolan Raticate is able to barely get in the quick attack farm down. Am I able to leave with the crunch? I am, and I throw it into an Azumarill, and this is really bad. Both of my back Pokemon struggle immensely up against Azumarill, and we don't even get a defense drop from that crunch. I'm going to bring in the Charizard. Charizard's Blast Burns hit quite hard against Azumarill, but this is just not a good situation to be in. I unfortunately have to sack the Charizard. Opponent is going to go for the Ice Beam, and even though it's neutral and non-stab, Charizard is glassy enough where it will KO from this health range, and now it is all up to Obstagoon, down a shield, with 2 very healthy Pokemon in the back, one of which is probably one of its worst counters. Sableye is able to let the Night Slash go through, and I am going to have to commit my second shield in case they return. They do full send the return, so that's a fine shield. Gonna overfarm here. I wanted the farm down, but I'm unable to get it. Gonna go for the Night Slash. Opponent is gonna let it go through, putting all their faith into shielded Azumarill. Gonna go for the obstruct here. This will lower their defense and raise mine. I actually am able to grab a shield, and that's quite nice here. I'm now gonna have to go for another obstruct and then a Night Slash if I want to do any meaningful damage. I am able to body the Play Rough thanks to my raised defense. I'm going to go for the obstruct. This has to get a shield here. Obstruct gets shielded, and now I leave with the Night Slash, and at this point, with -2 defense, Night Slash should KO, and we do the unthinkable, taking out an Azu and taking the win. Now it's come to my attention that Zionic has run a very similar team composition on his channel, which is really cool. I did not know he would be doing this at the time that I recorded these videos. His video was not up yet, but if he's running a similar core, then chances are this team is ought to do very well as well. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.